Hello and welcome to NewsClick. I am Paranjoy Guha Thakurta. On the 1st of July 2023, I was honored and privileged to interview India's greatest living filmmaker, Shyam Benegal. I spoke to him for almost 2 hours at his office in Tardeo in Mumbai. In the first part of this interview, we discussed his forthcoming film on Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. It's titled Mujib, The Making of a Nation, and scheduled to be released towards the end of 2023. In this, the second part of this interview, we discuss his famous trilogy of films made on Muslim women. We also discuss politics. We discuss the Muslim question in Narendra Modi's India. I ask him questions about minority communalism, majority communalism, and Shyam Benegal is somewhat ambivalent in condemning the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, and he's non-committal about commenting on India's present Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Let me specifically ask you, Shyam Benegal ji, दो व्यक्ति के ऊपर जिन दोनों के बारे में आपने फिल्म्स बनाए हैं. एक पंडित जवाहरलाल नेहरू. आज हम भारत सरकार ने जो आज भारतीय जनता पार्टी का समर्थक है, जो राष्ट्रीय स्वयंसेवक संघ का समर्थक है, आज हर मौके में पंडित जवाहरलाल नेहरू को जो छवि खराब करने के लिए आगे बढ़ रहा है और कर भी रहे. द इमेज ऑफ इंडियाज फर्स्ट प्राइम मिनिस्टर is being sought to be tainted and even tarnished by large sections of people who claim to be supporters of the Bharatiya Janata Party and the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. What do you have to say about this?
Well, clearly, you can't wipe out history. How can you take away the fact that you had India's first Prime Minister, probably who was the Prime Minister the longest in our country? Now, the fact is that he laid the foundation for the country. Look at the 5-year plans. Not all of them were successful, but the fact was that he laid the first brick as far as processes of development in India were concerned. No, a lot of the present day political establishment does not give him credit for that. But the fact is that he did. You see, his 5-year plans, the first 5-year plan and then the second 5-year plan, of course, it couldn't be completed, or it was done, but there were wars in between. We had a war in 1965, we had a war in 1971, but he was there when the 1965 war took place. So, you see, the problem is that you have a situation which has where he set, without him, you cannot think of a modern India. You can't really, at least to me, for myself, I don't think you can think of a modern India without the foundational work that was done by that generation. Among them, Jawaharlal Nehru played an important part. But there were other people like Sardar Patel and various other people who were, in fact, maybe more important.
No, today there are large sections of the ruling establishment, the ruling regime, who try to portray Nehru banam Sardar Patel. And a concerted effort is being made to portray Jawaharlal Nehru in a negative light. Why is this being done?
You see, I think that's being unfair to both. Because, as long as Sardar Patel lived, they were both very, they worked together. They may have had differences of opinion, differences of the method that had to be used and so on. And maybe Sardar Patel was more indulgent towards the younger man. All these things were there. But then these are in the larger, if you take a historical perspective, they were both equally important for independent India. And Sardar Patel, of course, there are people who believe that his contribution was greater. But then I don't want to get into that kind of thing. But the important thing was they worked shoulder to shoulder, when it came to India. Unfortunately, Sardar Patel died very quickly. If he had lived longer, maybe we would have had a slightly different history for ourselves. Yeah.
I repeat my question. Why is there such a concerted attempt to not just downgrade his contribution, but to actually tarnish the image of Nehru?
I know, but the fact is that this is an entirely, it's a political thing. And it's also kind of, I'm not quite sure whether it's a tactical thing for the opposition parties. No longer opposition party.
You mean the ruling party? The
of
ruling
country.
party.
But because there was a certain kind of tactic used, to come to power as well. And so people who went before you tend to discredit them. No? This is a tendency for most politicians to do that. There's nothing unusual in that.
You don't think it's anything unusual?
I don't.
Tell me, when you look at the changes that are being made to the history textbooks across the country, there is simultaneously a section of people who claim they owe allegiance to the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, to the Bharatiya Janata Party, to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, to glorify and deify Gandhiji's assassin, Nathuram Godse.
You see, RSS...
And his mentors, including Savarkar.
Yeah, but the fact is that, RSS never claimed to be a political party or political, the ideology, had a political ideology, except that of, the allegiance to the land, to the land of your birth and where you're living. So RSS in that sense, it was a kind of because when it came, the British were still here, So they were claiming their bit of land as theirs. But the important thing here was that there were several others. You had different kinds of political views on this. As far as RSS was concerned, it was based entirely on principles that are basically Hindu in that sense, But then they defined Hinduism as Hindu, that people who lived in India, because it was Hindustan and they were Hindus anyway. And it wasn't a definition of their religion. It was a definition of their status as Indians, being Hindus. Now, it wasn't totally accepted by a whole lot of other people, certainly not by minorities in this country.
Hinduism and Hindutva. More importantly, I repeat the question. Why is there an attempt made by sections of people to glorify Gandhi's assassin and his mentors, including Savarkar?
Well, that I don't think I can answer that question, because what the thing was. What the strategy was. political strategy in wanting to do something like this, because I cannot see the thing, except that I know that RSS claimed to be Indian, but it was Hindu, because they considered that everybody living in India were Hindus, And then of course there was they said that there was no caste system. There was no caste. There was no such thing as a minority.
But do you agree with that viewpoint?
No, I don't agree with that, because the fact is that I believe that our unity is a very unique thing as far as India is concerned. Our unity lies in its diversity, because we are not a country like a European country. There's something, the single language, single religion. Europe has defined their nation in those terms. But we have always defined our nation as a kind of, unity and diversity. That nobody disagrees with.
अब आप एक सवाल का जवाब हमें दीजिए। भारतवर्ष का जो स्वाधीनता के लिए जो हम लोग जो संग्राम किया, हमारे पिताजी और उनका पिता, द फ्रीडम स्ट्रगल, इसमें आरएसएस का कोई भूमिका था या नहीं? ये अत्यंत आज एक विवादित, एक कंट्रोवर्शियल एक विषय हो गया और चर्चा चल रहा है। और जैसे मैंने पहले बताया आपको, बच्चों के लिए जो स्कूल में जो पढ़ते हैं, जो किताब कभी दोबारा लोग लिख रहे हैं वो किताब।
RSS, as you know, had never claimed to be a political party.
Social organization.
Because it was never defined as such. And they saw themselves as a cultural organization. And it was a certain amount of cultural revivalism there. The whole idea that is cultural revivalism, but there it depends on who is defining that. It depends on from which part of the spectrum you are, and you will define it differently. But the important thing, of course, is that they were also a force for the good, as far as independent India was concerned.
1 minute. So you believe that the RSS
had a role to play.
But there is a controversy today that the RSS did not support the freedom movement, but sided often with the British.
Well, I don't know. That's probably stretching it a bit too far, because they didn't think that it was important, that they need to support the allies, as it were, during the war and all this kind of thing, or any such thing. Because they defined themselves as a cultural organization, not as a political organization.
Let me ask you then. The Bharatiya Janata Sangh was born. RSS is going to be 100 years old in 2025, if I'm not mistaken. The Bharatiya Janata Sangh is much younger. But the role of those who subscribe to their ideology, the Hindutva ideology, do you think they had a role to play in India's freedom movement?
Well, it depends on how you look at it, really, because it wasn't like the Congress. The Congress had a very distinct anti-British stance. A whole lot of other parties also did. Socialist being, that is the Congress Socialist Party also did. But then you had at the same time, you had people who had supported the British during the war. That is, you had Savarkar was clearly, against the British. Not only was he against...
But he wrote an apology.
No, but he later, because once he was condemned into jail, when he was put in jail for a lifetime, then he repudiated many of the things that he had earlier said, so that in order to get his freedom, he came out of jail. But the fact was that didn't make him any less a nationalist. You know, that because his stance was, of course, he came out of jail because when he was there in Andamans, he said that, you know.
So you're saying he wrote the series of letters of apology to the British rulers to get out of jail?
No, there were letters of apology which he had written. There's no question about that. But the fact was that they saw it as a tactic.
Let me ask you something related today. And I'm talking about today's India. And you have examined not just the way caste works, the way class works, politics of sex works, but we'll talk about that in a little while from now. You made 3 films which are often described as your Muslim women's trilogy. And these were 3 films: Mamo, 1994, Farida Jalal, Surekha Sikri. It deals with the partition, it deals with Pakistan and India. It deals with Mumbai, how she starts living in Mumbai, how she has to pay bribes to get a permanent visa, how she's arrested, sent back to Pakistan. And you've shown how political priorities often triumph humanitarian considerations. And it's told through the sister, Farida Jalal, the character played by Farida Jalal. She's a sister, her older sister's son. This is 1994. 1996, Sardari Begum. Musical, Kiran Khair, she's a member of the ruling party. Amrish Puri, who's no more. It deals with family relationships, generational relationships, sexual politics. But once again, there is a political angle, in the sense the stone which is thrown, the riot that takes place in Old Delhi. Less political is Zubeda, of course, loosely based on the life of the mother of film critic Khalid Mohammed, starring Karishma Kapoor and Rekha. Now what we see, it's called Zubeda's A Story of a Princess. And she marries an already married man who's married to the character played by Rekha, Manoj Bajpayee's character. And then her brother-in-law makes advances at her, but eventually both the Maharaja and Zubeda die in the plane crash. And you suggest that it was really a conspiracy for Uday Singh, the younger brother, to get hold of the kingdom. It is perhaps less political than the 2 other films. But all the 3 films talk about the condition of Muslims in India. Today, many could argue that Islamophobia is at a level that prevailed in the 40s, when the subcontinent was partitioned, when Bengal and Punjab were partitioned. और आजकल बहुत लोग कहते हैं कि ये अगर आप भारतवर्ष में मुसलमान हैं तो आप सेकंड क्लास नागरिक हैं, या यू आर अ सेकंड क्लास सिटीजन. आपने देखा क्या हुआ, सिटीजनशिप अमेंडमेंट एक्ट, नेशनल रजिस्टर ऑफ सिटीजन्स. तो एक तरह से द प्रेजेंट रूलिंग एस्टैब्लिशमेंट, द भारतीय जनता पार्टी and its ideological parent, the social and cultural organization, the RSS, who are believers in Hindutva, and their critics say they are believers in a majoritarian ideology. As a person who's examined through your films Muslim women, what are your views on how Islamophobia has spread in India today, where 1 out of 7 Indians who are Muslim, how they feel in today's India, in the last 9 years that Narendra Modi has been in power? There are more Muslims in India in all countries in the world except for Indonesia and perhaps Pakistan as well. But the Muslims in this country, 1/7 of India, do feel that they are beleaguered, that they're being treated as second-class citizens. Large sections of the media have contributed to the spread of Islamophobia. And barring a few token individuals, the Bharatiya Janata Party, not a single member of parliament is a Muslim who is to the Lok Sabha.
There are two things here. One, the most important thing is that the country India got partitioned on the basis that you had to have, because of the population ratios and so on and so forth, Jinnah brought about the two-nation theory. Now that two-nation theory became actually a fact. But the odd part of it was that, India is not sort of clearly between Muslims and Hindus, or Hindus and other minorities and Muslims on one side. It has never been like that. But the fact was that if you are going to make a nation, create a nation, then you have to have that kind of division made. Now, which they made, which caused horrors all over the place. I mean, and vast movements of populations, in 1947, 48. And then even later, when you had sort of Pakistan split itself into two. But the important thing was that when the first partition took place between India and Pakistan, at that time, you had, in people's minds, that we constantly claim to be secular. That is India, claimed to be secular. We created a constitution that we, made it important, that our secularism was very important to us. But the funny part of it was that because it was a Hindu majority country, India being a Hindu majority country, there was always a tendency for minorities to feel that they didn't really have a kind of place here as they should have. Pakistan was fine because it was already divided into, and it could claim itself, could make the claim of being Islamic, and Islamic Republic also. But even that got it got hit when Pakistan itself split. So because this is still part of the continuing historical dialogue in this country, because and we constantly have different kinds of problems. People claiming this, people claiming that, all sorts of things. But the important thing is that you can keep claiming if you want. You can always evolve. The whole process becomes, as long as it doesn't become a tinderbox.
But tell me, has Islamophobia in India again peaked, and we have in some ways regressed, gone back 80 years to the 40s?
Well, we can use the word, but I don't think I would use the word Islamophobia so easily. Because, we have, for instance, if you look at a place like Hyderabad, with the Nizam state of Hyderabad. Now, when it was a Nizam state of Hyderabad, it had 4 languages. It had Urdu, it had Telugu, it had Kannada, and of course it had English, because English was the language through which all higher education was taught, So you had, these were the languages. But then the moment we developed a concept that language will determine the nation. So a language is one of the important components of a nation. then this whole Hyderabad thing was collapsed.
श्याम बेनेगल जी, मैं दोबारा सवाल आपसे पूछ रहा हूँ। ये आज भारतवर्ष में पिछले 9 साल में भारतीय जनता पार्टी एक भी मुसलमान प्रार्थी लोकसभा चुनाव में नहीं रखा। आप देखिए 2019 लोकसभा चुनाव के बाद 543 लोकसभा सांसद में 303 भारतीय जनता पार्टी के हैं, एक भी मुसलमान नहीं है। 1/7 of India is not represented in the lower house of parliament in the ruling party. So, what do you have to say that the Bharatiya Janata Party, which claims that its ideological parent, the social and cultural organization called the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, that it has shown this is their attitude towards 1/7 of India, 200 million Muslims. What do you have to say?
You know, about Muslim representation in parliament or in parliament or in parties, I don't really believe that's all that important, quite frankly, because you don't necessarily have to be represented by your religion, by your claim of being one or another religion. If we claim to be a democracy, we shouldn't worry about these things. Why should we worry about that? Because according to me, as long as there are equal opportunities, equal opportunities when it comes to work, equal opportunities when it comes to education.
Is that happening in India?
Well, I think it is happening, but it's happening fairly slowly. But in India, we also had another thing. We had, for instance, schools that catered to Muslims. So you had, but slowly that changed. For instance, I come from Hyderabad, and in Hyderabad, we had, for instance, my school, the school that I went to. It was called Mehboob College High School. Now, the fact was that when it was originally started, it wasn't seen as a school for everybody. It was seen as a school that would bring up the Muslim population, the quality of education for them, since they were all, madrasa people, so they didn't have modern education. Now, the fact was that when he started a school like this, Nizam started a school like this. Then Mehboob High School, like Nizam College was there. And it was, the original language in which you were given education was in Urdu. But it changed.
नहीं, मैं आज का भारतवर्ष के बारे में आपसे सवाल उठा रहा हूँ।
किसके बारे में?
Today's India, आज का भारतवर्ष. Do you believe that Muslims feel that they have been treated as second-class citizens?
I'm not quite sure that is entirely true, because I don't believe that if you went to a place where there has been a great amount of, like say for instance, the old Mysore state, that is Karnataka, Hyderabad, that is Andhra Pradesh, but mainly
now Telangana.
The Telangana part. Now, I don't believe that this holds good for them. I don't think.
But what about northern India? What about Uttar Pradesh?
Well, there you see, which has been affected, those parts of the country that were affected by partition. That feeling is much greater there.
No, that's Bengal and Punjab largely. But
Yeah.
I'm talking about Uttar Pradesh.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan. There is a feeling. Muslims do feel that they are being treated as second-class citizens. Do you agree? And this feeling has grown in the last 9 years of the Narendra Modi regime. Would you agree with me?
I don't know enough about northern India in that sense, because to make any kind of broad comment on that, because it's very difficult for me to say that. Because you see, when I'm traveling, it doesn't seem like there's any problem there. But then that is very, in some ways, it's quite superficial.
See what happened in Gujarat in 2002.
Oh, Gujarat is different.
See what happened in Delhi. Sir, see what happened in Delhi very recently.
No, Gujarat has a certain, because you had Muslim majority parts, because there was a Nawab, there was what was his name? The fellow who went off.
Junagadh.
Now, Junagadh had a Muslim majority at one time.
But today's Gujarat, the proportion of the population that is Muslim is half of that of the rest of the country. Rest of India, as per the 2011 census, is around 14%. So you don't want to comment on, you don't believe there is Islamophobia has reached a level comparable to the 40s?
Well, it comes up from time to time, because we do have riots, we have different kinds of things like that. But I don't believe that it is a threat to our country in that sense. There is a certain amount of Islamophobia, certainly there is. Just as much as there is a kind of prejudice among Muslims. These things show themselves much more easily in things like marriages and stuff like that.
What kind of communalism would you condemn more? The communalism of the majority community or the communalism of the minority community? जो बहुमत में है जिन लोग, उनका सांप्रदायिकता के बारे में आप क्या कहेंगे?
Minority communalism is not that dangerous. As majoritarian, communalism, that is worse, because they have much greater influence. See, minority communalism is, of course, communalism generally is bad in a secular country, but the fact is that minority communalism is something that can be held together. But the majoritarian communalism is really dangerous to all minorities.
Do you think we are going through such a stage like that in India at present?
I don't believe that. Because I think it's not. There's no such. It's not a simple between two groups. It's not just Hindus and Muslims. Because we have people from different faiths. I mean, you have Christians, you have this,
But look, last time we had a census in this country was in 2011. We haven't had one in 2021. Okay? But that census shows that roughly 80%, little more than 80% of the population is Hindu. 14% is Muslim, and the rest are the other communities.
Yeah, of course. But then, I don't know how that is a threat to our, how our unity is affected by that. I don't believe so. Because, there was a time, for instance, Northeast, when it was on the boil.
It is still, Manipur is on the boil.
Manipur, yes. But just now it's not, the whole Manipur is one, but the whole Nifa part.
Arunachal Pradesh, Northeastern Frontier Agency. Okay. Shyam Benegal ji, you have received several awards. You've got 18 National Film Awards. You were given in 2005, the Dada Saheb Phalke Award, India's highest award for filmmakers. In 1976, you got the Padma Shri. In 1991, you got the Padma Bhushan. You've served on the juries of several film festivals in India and across the world, including in 2009 at the Moscow International Film Festival. At the same time, your films indicate that you're not really pro-establishment. In more ways than one, you have been a beneficiary of the establishment, and yet you've been a critique and a critic, often a strident critic of the establishment. And I'm looking at all the films that you made, and including the most recent one just before Mr. Narendra Modi came to power in 2014, the one on the Indian Constitution, Samvidhan, Rajya Sabha Television, March 2014. You made films on the occasion of the Golden Jubilee of India's independence, Sankranti. Of course, Bharatiya Khoj was there. At the same time, you work with the government, you criticize the government.
No, because you see, I personally believe that India has to be democratic. Because the diversity points to that direction.
All right.
Right? That is number one. Number two, you have to look at the flaws. You must pinpoint the flaws in your system. Therefore, you, as a filmmaker, or you normally look at your society in a particular way, and therefore you also look at the flaws that exist. To pinpoint those flaws is one of the things you can do through cinema, which I have been doing over a long period of time. It does not mean that I'm against the system, but I'm really very concerned about the flaws in our system, which need to be pinpointed from time to time.
So, do you feel in the last 9 years that Narendra Modi has been the Prime Minister of India, democracy has become stronger in India or weaker in India?
I'm not quite sure. You see, it's still, the jury is out on that one. Because, it's very difficult to tell. But one of the things, of course, is that there has been a certain amount of, it has been possible for a certain kind of development to take place, because much of the dissatisfaction has been contained.
I'm not able to understand
Up to
you.
a point, it has been contained, except in the Northeast and places like that. By and large, of course, but you have to accept that. But the fact is
what about Gujarat 2002? What about Delhi? Delhi, as recently as 2019. What do you say to that? You've seen communal riots, Hindu-Muslim riots. You see it even now as we are talking in the state where you are and where we are sitting, in Maharashtra. It's not as if Hindu-Muslim tensions in the country have come down. There is, on the contrary, there is evidence that
no, it's not.
it has gone up.
I'm saying that it is being, or rather, we know how to contain it. We have known how to contain it, because you see, if you look back from the time of partition, you see that.
No, the question is, was it contained in Gujarat in 2002? Was it contained in Delhi almost 2 decades later, northeastern Delhi? Was it contained? Or was it the establishment was complicit with the rioters and they belonged to the majority community, the Hindus?
I really wouldn't know. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll stop all my questions on politics, but I have one last question. How do you evaluate Narendra Modi as the Prime Minister?
How did I?
Evaluate Narendra Modi as the Prime Minister of India in the last 9 years?
Well, the fact is that he has not curtailed democracy in that sense. The democratic norms have not been constantly tampered with. That he has not done.
I would disagree with you, but
Yeah.
You are entitled to your opinion.
Yeah.
I believe whether it's the media, whether it's the civil service, whether it's law enforcing agencies, whether it's been constitutional authorities, all these organizations have, which are supposed to provide checks and balances in a democracy, in my opinion, it's become weaker in the last 9 years. Would you agree with me?
Well, I cannot comment on that really.
Okay. We conclude the second segment of this interview with Shyam Benegal, India's greatest living filmmaker. In this segment, we've discussed politics, and I keep questioning him. I have questioned him again and again on his views on majoritarianism. He's clear. The communalism of the majority Hindu community is to be condemned more than the communalism of the minority Muslim community. Yet, he is ambivalent about the role of leaders of the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, in India's freedom movement, and he is also non-committal about Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Wait for the third part of this interview. Shyam Benegal reminiscences about several individuals. Actors he made, actors like Smita Patil, Om Puri, Amrish Puri. He reminiscences about the films he's made, about the documentary films he made on Satyajit Ray. That will all happen in the third and final segment of this interview. Till then, keep watching NewsClick, subscribe to this channel.